Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
We did not engage in conflict that was out of line with our mission.
Is it disloyalty? Is it sedition? Is it treason to oppose the hand of tyranny? Never!
I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me death!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point, so come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne, creator of the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 video series.
which would be climate, food, and economy baked into that. Every one of those is disrupted during these cycles of our sun. I'm with Ransom Godwin. I need to change that introduction. Co-host, hosts, we're both hosts. We're hosting it up tonight. I was going to go huge in the beginning here, and I have a friend of mine in Greece was telling me that the planes that put out fires across Greece during this season when it gets really hot are leased from Russia, so they don't have any firefighting aircraft this year because of the sanctions. And he's like, well, some huge fires have already started. They're kind of behind the eight ball because they don't even have the planes to work with it because of it's worth the cost. I don't know. If you can't have firefighting planes because of some political thing, I think that's a little more of a safety hazard than it is common sense. And same with Germany, turning back on the coal power plants. Sorry, Greta. You saw that little kid mining for your rare earth minerals in Namibia or somewhere. The Congo, perhaps. Your childhood ruined. Those mining rare earths crawling into small tunnels, Greta, to get you your phone so you can complain about Germany turning back on the coal-burning power plants because Russia cut off the gas. Go skip some rope or something now. Time's passed. But these are the kind of things that are happening. Now, how it will affect you, though? See, that's the whole thing. You can look at all these events happening, but how will it affect you? Climate, food, economy. And that's what we should talk about tonight. Ransom, what do you think? Thanks for joining me. I got a lot of thoughts, and I'm hoping I can compare them with somebody else of like mind and brilliance. Thanks for joining. Oh, did I? See, I forgot to. Ransom, hold on. That was a good introduction. I forgot to add you in there. Hold on a second. I just got out of the field. I was running around the forest trying to cut some trails in. I was trying to get a little more waterfall access and things like this. I came back a little bumbleheaded out of the forest for a few hours, I guess. So while we wait for Ransom to connect here, the whole reason to cut the trails was to have access to the natural forage around the property where I'm at. We got the wild blueberries, areas to cut in, to walk, small trails to be able to access water. There's different mosses on there. There's different types of berry trees. We got hackberry, hawkberry in the different areas, and wild red berries or like a wild raspberry that just grow natural. But, to cut. And what about the muscadine vines to cut little trails through to be able to access the food? So I've been out doing that for a while. Ransom, I forgot to add to you. My bad. Thanks for joining.
No, I was in the chat room listening to the radio. So I was a little delayed.
Tony forgot to add me.
I was telling him he hadn't called me yet. So hold on. Anyway, yeah, how's it going, man? I've been jumping down this cycle thing, and I sent you a bunch of messages there. I don't know if you probably didn't get to them, but I found some amazing stuff kind of with that topic. I had forgot we were talking about the Mayan thing, and then you asked me again to send you a picture of the glyph and stuff I was talking about, and I found some really cool cycles that are happening that I've never actually heard anyone in this field talk about. And I don't know how they would have missed it. It's such an obvious pattern with the Mayan and the Pleiades and their clock, which is a cosmic clock, basically. I mean, it's the short version of the precession of the equinox. And their little portion of it, they even backdated their calendar, back to 3,114 BC and started counting there for some kind of reason. And when I was looking into this and I was looking into more references about the 2012 close of the cycle, I came across this mathematical thing that just kind of popped in my head. So, I just decided to find out. And basically the Mayans were tracking the precession, or I don't know if that's the right word, the different places that the Pleiades come up every 72 years in slightly a different increment. And it takes the entire, procession of the equinox to complete back till Pleiades comes back. And for whatever reason, they were, really intrigued by the Pleiades, and it's a big deal in North American, Native American cultures too. But they were keeping track of it since that date that they started their calendar, and they ended the calendar. Now, I just, off a whim, divided 72 in it to see how many times Pleiades has moved since that date, and it just happens to be coming up on 72 in 2024. Weird. So it'd be the 72nd time Pleiades.
Wait a second, Ransom, you just disappeared. That was super interesting.
Oh, well.
Well, okay, that was the 72nd time.
6 something, 1 forever, but it was very close to a 72-year cycle of the Pleiades moving one increment. And that's how they kept track of the precession of the equinox, because when that completed, they knew that this entire cycle, this massive 26,000 or 52,000, because if you know of the 26,000, then automatically you know that it'll repeat at the 52,000. And it's ironic, the 5,126 years is really close to a short version of 5,200. And it's just bizarre that I think actually the date that they were talking about is right now. And they never said that the world was going to end according, that was kind of a big myth coming up to 2012. But actually it would have just began the new start of a cycle. And they talked about one of the creator gods and destruction gods, the war gods. And I don't know how to say his name exactly, but it's Bolon Yaktu Ku. And he's like a god figure that's a creation figure that started these cycles. And they talk about him way in the prehistory, way before he appeared, their calendar started. So they're talking about their creation myth, which is probably hundreds of thousands of years old, right? And this is a character for them. So we're talking like an Inky Enlil character here. And he's supposed to come back at the end of the cycle. And weirdly, the Mayans tried to, or at least the elite, tried to hide this fact. There's what's called Monument Number 6. And on that is where we get the 2012 date and the end of the calendar. And it has a small reference to the 9 gods and Bolon Yaktu. So no one knew about this other one until 2011. And the way that they put it into the top of the pyramid in Mexico was that no one could see it. So the inscription was face in and they mortared over it. So it was like a time capsule, so to speak. And it's weird that they found it in 2011, but it gives another precise date of the end of the calendar and the start of a new calendar. And check this out and tell me if this doesn't sound a lot like plasma petroglyph talk. Let's see here. When they talk about this guy, they've pretty much said that the tablet actually really, it doesn't get too specific like doom and gloom, but it does say that Bolon Yaktu will come back in his full regalia in the sky and ascend down from the sky. So that we're talking about a thing in the sky that everybody sees. And he's also associated as a serpent, just like his relative that probably everybody knows, Quetzalcoatl, or he's got different names in the South. In South America, it's Viracocha, and he's got all these different names, but this is his counterpart. And it's so bizarre that we're coming up to this Pleiades, and David, that the Pleiades are the main constellation that all farming techniques around the world have always kept track of, to know when to farm and when not to farm. So we're talking ancient human knowledge that goes back at least 26,000 years, at least in the understanding of the time. But they set their calendar, like I said, about 3,000 years BC. So it's pretty bizarre that we're coming up on, and that the Mayans thought that 13 and 12 were very important numbers, because they too, like the ancient Sumerians, had a sexadecimal type mathematics that incorporated a lot of 3, 6, 9, 12, etc. What do you think about that?
Well, I think your 52,000 year number is half of a glaciation cycle. So if you do those 26,000 year loops on that just one precession of the equinox, everybody's like, whoa, it's 25,000 years. Yeah, it's 1/4 of a glaciation cycle, going back 100,000 plus years. Then what? So what happened to the last one? They were just like us. So what happened to that 10,000 years of warmth around 118,000 years ago, 115,000 years ago? What happened to them? Where were they? No record. Completely gone? Really? Advanced civilization as high as ours right now, possible, and they just disappeared to absolute zero. Not ever a question of what happened to that civilization, or did we find relics from it still around? And you need to ask yourself, with these legends of who came down to teach them, it's simple math. I'll agree and say, I'm going to be super, super, super conservative and say what we know as science now in the third dimension, as everything came into existence in a single thought and vibration pattern, the way we measure time right now with light and distance, and we understand that light and distance means something, outcome A, like an amount of time. I would say 10 billion years is the entire galaxy as we know it. And it could go as high as 12 billion or somewhere in the middle. I'm going to be super conservative and just say 10. But our Earth, as we know it in the classical quote-unquote sense, 4.5 billion years old. Now think about that. Something has a 6 billion year head start on us. So what is that? So those, what was considered the bringers of knowledge, I mean, how old are they? And where is their society based, and how old are they in terms of epochs or eons? Because that's the way all those gods were described as, or at least the belief system. It wasn't like, oh, this being lived to be 100. We're talking like tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of years old being that takes physical form. And I wonder if they do that when the plasma state gets high enough, because you'd have to see it descend in the sky, but it's using a plasma rope of sorts. Like, how cool would that be to watch something come down on a plasma discharge down and like, all right, you just lost everything, but we're going to teach you how to do it again. That's the real deal right there. And we're back at it. So I'm glad you brought up the cycles of that.
Yeah, it's really trippy, though, the wording or the idea that these Mayans were trying to portray about this ancient creator god, and the way that they've translated monument number 6. They say that, he will come back and show everybody in the sky, though. This is what makes me think of plasma petroglyphs. So they've translated it to say, witness the display of Bolanyakte Ku in his full costume and regalia. And they imagine, because of the depictions of him, that this is some kind of giant serpent-looking thing in the sky. And every time that he's referenced, he always comes from the sky. So it's really bizarre, too. And the association with the Pleiades, which the Mayans and the Olmec and really everybody we know in the ancient time period was paying close attention to the Pleiades. So the fact that, human beings were keeping track of these dates goes into some of the new discoveries about hominids. They pushed the threshold for early hominids back 1 million years because they keep finding hominids of different species like Australopithecus that's 1 million years older than they previously thought. And if you remember, they thought like 3.1 million years was old for Lucy, and then they kept finding older and older and older hominids that seemed to be in different ways quite advanced. There was one type of hominid they discovered in South Africa that was burying its dead in a way and putting them in a tomb. And we're not talking about like a human-like hominid. They explain it's more like an ape-like creature. However, it was weirdly having deep thoughts, it seems, because it would take its family members and tuck them away inside of a tomb-like thing. And we're not talking about just throwing them in a hole. They had to navigate a whole system of tunnels to get the people in the right spot. And I'm calling them people, like really primitive people. So even mainstream archaeologists are now pushing the date of hominids back 1 million years, which, the implications for that is, of course, modern humans probably have been living a lot longer than they have given us credit for in our history. Obviously, probably 1 million years, they were modern humans at least.
You cut out again. See, that is incredibly interesting because I would follow on that and say that if they have to pull 1 million years back in the timeline, then suddenly 1 million years where the tech comes out of the woodwork right now with the reset. Like, what is all about that?
Wow. Sorry. Yeah, and I never get warned when I get cut off. It's only when I come back in.
Yeah, you did. You got cut off right then.
Happened.
Did you hear my response to that, though?
No, go ahead.
No, with that happening, if they push it back 1 million years, what that means is a new timeline emerges. And where did 1 million years of tech go? And then suddenly we're at this reset, and all of a sudden, all these new magnetic motors, and free energy devices are just popping out of the woodwork, ethereal power. And where did 1 million years go? Sorry, that's a lot of tech to disappear. Tartaria? I don't know. Something's missing.
Right, exactly. That was my point. If they're pushing the ancient hominids back, then that necessarily pushes back modern man. And Neanderthals got a firm date of 450,000 years. So that's the same timeline as the Sumerians give for tinkering with us.
Yeah, don't mess with my hominids, man. You're going to cross, Ransom, you're seriously going to cross the line when you're messing with my hominids and my nematodes. At that point,
Want to mess with the nematodes. Speaking of which, not to add bad vibes out there to the food shortage situation, but I saw all these articles pop up in the last 2 days about the superbug, the antibiotic resistant bacterium superbug that supposedly is infecting all of European swine. So wait for that to hit the headlines as massive swine shortages because of this new bug. It's not new. It's just that they're saying now it's 50 years evolved of antibiotic resistance. So now all of a sudden it's jumping from pigs to humans fairly easily. How bizarre.
More food shortages, huh? Like, how many more things can Europe be the center of for disruption of the world? I mean, Biden's the center of disruption for the United States economy, energy production. But look at Europe. Classic scapegoat for all things disruption. Now it's going to be, Germany needs to turn back on the coal power plants because they're not getting the gas from Russia. Oh, that disrupted the climate. Okay. Oh, they couldn't get the sovereign wealth bonds. Okay. They're trying to get a bill passed to do an auditing of Fort Knox, or actually, quote unquote, Fed gold holdings. It's all going to point back to Europe. Everything is. There needs to be a scapegoat why everything has gone wrong. But the BRICS coming out, you see how this rides on top of the natural cycle? It's unbelievable on how you can disappear history inside a natural cycle inside this time of chaos where all information will be lost or at least redistorted back to the victors rewrite the history. Well, how many times has this gone on again? creation myth and legend, when they bring down agriculture and get humanity restarted, is a far huge cry from censoring the information. And when it goes into some sort of blackout, restart the internet and delete a lot of stuff unless it was in paper form. I mean, are we going back to this cycle again and again? And how far back does it really stretch? How many millions of years of resets have we gone through?
That's a really good question, and it seems like the reason I brought up that Mayan, well, really it's Olmec. It's an Olmec calendar. They're the ones that created the calendar and the math system and everything. But the way that they kind of visualize it for you, and then when you turn it into these actual cycles like a circle, it's a big gear system that really resembles some kind of mechanism that was built, and it's really bizarre because they're arguing whether or not the Mayan / Olmec number system is actually more precise than our atomic clock by about 2 decimal points. How bizarre. Speaking of that, though,
but Ransom, let me stop you can I stop you for a second? I'm looking at the lithographs and the images, because I looked at those earlier. One of them looks like a descending plasma glyph, especially with the owl eyes. That's a very common plasma display when things are reaching equilibrium before they then split. Like, if you're doing cymatics, you can get a vibratory pattern to hold in a wavelength and sound frequency that it holds the shape of, like, let's say 4 petals on a flower. But when you turn it up, it'll shift and it'll turn to 8 petals on a flower with a square. Well, same thing with the owl eyes. They're being energized as they reach equilibrium. And once they start, there's 1, and then it splits, and then there's 2, and then there's 3, but they're opposite sides. So that's why you see double circles around an enormous amount of these beings that go back 6, 7 circles deep into their eyes, because those are layers of plasma that are starting to vibrate faster that make concentric circles within themselves. What I'm seeing here on the right side, where it says both texts imply that the method of arrival is by descent, one of those looks like a plasma glyph to me. The other one on the left side certainly looks like Mayan petroglyphs or Mayan writing in the more ancient style to describe what was a sky god coming down to help humanity. Versus, because I'm looking at 2 distinct things, they're so very, very different. One's a plasma glyph, the other one describes, as we would write in text versus image.
Yeah, that was good timing. I put that picture up right when you were reading it.
But it makes sense, though, the way the iconography is moving there.
Yeah, and just the description of talking about the regalia. Recently, we did the Squatterman thing, and Diamond was talking a lot about the different phases that probably put up different shapes in the plasma. And one of the end results kind of this big thing kind of would resemble a giant snake with wings over the entire northern hemisphere, and they might even be able to see it from equatorial regions like I don't know, the Yucatan Peninsula, where they're putting down that Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl and Viracocha and all of these serpent gods came down and taught them stuff. And it is kind of bizarre. Or is there a real correlation with this just being symbology? Or are they talking about real stuff? It seems to be, it might be both. Kind of the symbology for the times, it fits right into the plasma petroglyph phenomenon that seems to be showing, different magnetic, anomalies happening that people were seeing from the sky or seeing in the sky, looking like different stuff, duck heads and big eyeballs, depending on which angle of the thing you were looking at. It's hard to, not associate some of these things. So it kind of makes you wonder what they were seeing around, the equator band 5,000 years ago. So this is about the time they were building the pyramids also. And this is when they started their clock. So what significant, in all of these cycles, there had to have been something very significant happen at 3,114 BC. What was it? Like, what were we doing as a species on this planet? It seems kind of sooner up here. Is that when they got a hold of the ancient not technology, but the ancient time system and calendars from the prior ancient pre-Diluvian, civilization that seemed to be worldwide.
Oh, wait, could I stop you though?
Yeah.
Okay, so it came from that period, but then it had to have been passed down from the previous period, and then the previous period. But we're talking about interglacials here, 100,000 year glacial period, 90,000 years on average in ice. Could be 91,500. Okay, I'll give it to you. 92,000, and then 8,000 years or 10,000 years average of warmth. It's closer to 10, at least through the last 5. But that knowledge was at least passed down through those cataclysms that had wiped out and wiped out and wiped out. Because if you're talking in precession of the equinoxes, we are equating 4 of those cataclysmic events every one glaciation period. Now do the math. They at least have 5 glaciation periods at super incredible precision on atmospheric CO2 concentration, rises in temperature, how long that period lasted, what type of flora and fauna flourished during that time, and when it collapsed. So that calendar system you're just referencing, like pre-Andaluvians, okay, whoop-de-doo, Ransom, they were like 30,000 years ago, 20,000 years, whatever. Where did that knowledge come from 5 million years ago, 500,000 years ago? I'll play devil's advocate and say, all right, 500,000 years of cycles got passed down to us and we still understand it. Even if it was 100,000 years, there's still been 4 massive reset cycles where that information has been passed again and again and again. It's almost like somebody wants us to get it every single time. Now, where would they lie? Above planet or underground, deep in the earth, 300 miles under? I don't know. They sure know a lot about cycles and keep resetting everything under their own same rules after the bug gets scraped off the windshield. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too deep.
No, not at all. I was going to ask you with your scientific brain and all, the city of Teotihuacan in Mexico is dated 100 years older than any Mayan city. So it probably actually was either an Olmec or a Mayan city. And there's megalithic stuff there that insinuates, there was already something there when they actually even built that on top of it. And in 1908, when they actually started uncovering it, see, a lot of people think it was just there. And when the Spanish got here, there was Aztec people living there, but that's not true at all. It was actually buried in a lot of sediment. Almost the whole complex was. And in 1908, they started excavating off of it. And now that we see what was going on. So now keep in mind that the Aztec mythos says that they came out of a cave. And another part of their mythos says they came from a land to the north to where they are. But one of their mythos says that they came out of a giant cave from this city. And there were like 7 caves in it. It just so happens that under 5 different designed pyramids at the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan, it's actually like a Russian dollhouse where there's layers and layers of previous pyramids built under that. And then keep in mind, it was covered in sediment on top of that. But anyway, when you get down to the very bottom, there's this gigantic pool of liquid mercury it's way out of place there. It's like the imperial chambers of the Chinese emperor at the other pyramids in China. But not only that, there's mica in lines that connect all of the pyramids in this, that these things are technologic things. One to do with heat and another one to do with electromagnetism. And then there's also evidence of a giant explosion at the center, right in front of the Pyramid of the Sun, that burnt and vitrified some of the stones around it in front of it. So kind of my question is like, you think it's possible that is where they came out of the cave at? I mean, because they kind of say that. And what's also bizarre is the Aztec were on a mission to find another Mayan city that's on the coast that they believed was the entrance to the underworld. And it's this big old cenote where ocean water meets fresh water, and it has a weird, creepy, look to it down inside of it. How they knew that, I don't know. But the Aztecs seem to have been, word of mouth that that people had started building civilization again and then came back, meaning that they might have had really old knowledge of whenever everything got destroyed and covered in dirt. So what was the question?
No, that would be that's a good description, and my answer would be distorted history, because I am very familiar with a place called Petra in Jordan, and Ransom, I'll bring that right back bullseye with what you were just talking about. Let me do my circle logic here. I've been to Petra before, way back in the early 1990s, and I was at a estate sale recently. That person worked for Saudi Aramco in Saudi Arabia in the 1970s and 1960s, bought a ton of books. One of them was Petra. So it was a pictorial book with lithographs from the 1800s in it, and I was shocked that it was even there, and I was like, I'm taking that one. That picture in that one page is worth the price of the book. Well, there are like 50 of those pictures. So my recollection of Petra is going back past Babylon into that time period, 7,000 years ago. We start with Sumerians, we move forward, and then suddenly the Hittites just pop out of nowhere, trading routes through those same chasms that are down deeply in the desert there, where Petra and the treasury and all those things you've seen with Indiana Jones in that movie, with going into the rock, like, canyon face into the treasury. That is at least 5,000 years in history. And another fact, if you want to bring up at a party about the Hittites, if you would, factoid for a party, they found magic mushrooms stored in honey in clay vessels, 5,000 years, still good. That was my first foray into understanding that honey is perpetually good, that there's no expiration date on salt and honey, baking soda, these types of things that they have expiration dates on, vinegar. Like, come on. But once I knew that about honey, after learning that about the Hittites, because I traveled to Petra, my mind changed about, wow, how old is this place? Okay, and then lock that in your memory banks and then fast forward 30 years. So we were talking the other night about traveling, and we watched a show about a guy who goes around, eats different foods in different areas. So he went to Edom, and then he came up to Jordan, and during one of the times they were down in near what I consider like no man's desert land, almost nothing out there, a few people walking around, a $5 entrance fee kind of Petra that I used to remember, into this place that had all these restaurants inside. And I thought, well, that's really strange. And he talked about the history of it, going, yeah, this thing goes back 2,000 years or 2,500 years. And I was like, whoa, hold on. Wait a minute. So the history they're selling at Petra now is 2,500 years old. But when I went there in the 1990s, it was at least 5,000 years old, minimum 5. So then I thought, I was like, that's really interesting. Let's watch another video about Petra travel. And everybody that has been there, at least all these videos we watch about people traveling to Petra, I was trying to see what the dates they were doing, what they were talking about. They've rewritten the history, even since I've been alive. That is the craziest thing. It's a 2,500-year-old site now. But when I went there, it was a 5,000-year-old site. That is insane. And exactly what you're talking about there, Ransom, I want to loop this back. Because what you're seeing with the Temple of the Sun is above the water. Now, there's an entire city under that lake there as well, which predates what's above ground by how many thousands or tens of thousands of years. I mean, how many layers of history are we taught or told, or how quickly can they revamp history? If what and I bring it back because that book that I bought that was published in 1973 from the person who worked at Saudi Aramco also talks about a 5,000-year history of Petra with the Hittites. So when you're following along and you go from the Sumerians to the Babylonians, you get the Assyrians squeezed in, you got the Hittites in there too. And then if you swing around in Oman and come around, you got the kingdom of Aksum and Shum and all these, where are they? Myrrh and frankincense traders along the frankincense route. from southern Saudi Arabia up through the Red Sea. But at that time, it was much, much, much more lush. There's a couple ancient dams that are in there down in Yemen. So the port of Yemen, hotly contested place. But inside Yemen, in the center of Yemen, off the coast, if you look at a mountain range there, you'll see that's where the old dam out of legend, say 1,200 years ago, was placed. Thing used to be like 30 feet deep, 50, 60 miles of water. That place is getting wetter again. And, you know, things circling through history. Just what's been erased and what's truly here. Because those spice and frankincense traders rolling up through Petra had been there since that antiquity, but it has been changed. I'm really realizing I need to study more about modern history, what they're teaching people now about the ages of stories, because it just came to my attention days ago, and I'm still baffled by how that could even happen. Really, have they rewritten every single history book to say 2,500 years, not 5,000? Because that extends the timeline. They got to explain 5,000 years of history and melted buildings and rocks that don't erode over 5,000 years as to why they have millions of years of water erosion in a desert on temples and complexes there. I don't know. It's weird. Ask Greta, I guess, Ransom.
How dare you? No, Petra's a really interesting site, and it actually there's some weird stuff there that links that to sites in China. And then it's funny that you were talking about the mushrooms, because every place that I've gone in the Southwest, like all these ancient Chacoan or Anasazi sites, they have one thing in common, is they usually have at least one or two windows or doors that are in the shape of a mushroom. And you find that same motif all the way down into Mexico. It's kind of bizarre. And we know that the Mayan and Aztec both were making little ladles and pots and stuff, especially for mushrooms. Another bizarre kind of connection there to the Middle East is some of the oldest Olmec, carvings or whatever you call it on the rock show them with the little pouch similar to the Sumerians. And a lot of people believe that is either both mushrooms and or pollen. Pollen because, when they depicted in the Sumerian thing that they used the little pine cone, but they always had their little bag. And, I know the ancient alien people kind of go in the technological direction. But what's more simple is that they're always going to the tree of life and they have a little bag of pollen and they're pollinating. They're farmers. But the thing that kind of links China to Petra, and I know that site because that's one of the sites that has evidence of ancient high technology, the way that they carved out some of those perfect buildings. Some of the rooms there have a weird design in it that's similar to that giant cave that's unexplainable and undateable in China, where it looks like either they use some kind of chemical technology or a little machine to go in and carve it out in equal strips and remove all the rubble, and the rubble's not there. And then also at Petra, they have the older looking habitations that look like they're, like you just walked into Fred Flintstone's era, and it's like complete little holes and stuff. It's so weird that in that same place, they have working water, they have rooms that are specifically designed to resonate a specific hum, and that same hum, I think it's like 1.5 hertz or something like that. And it's also found in places like England, in some of the stone buildings that they buried. When you go in there, it has a certain resonance. And then also one of the oldest cities that they found, I forgot the name of it off the top of my head, but it's on one of the islands that has that underground echo chamber that resonates at a certain hum too. And all of these people knew that. Those are all links in technology that aren't supposed to be connected, that obviously go back 5,000 years or more. Petra is one of those places, though, that is named and cited by other groups of people living prior to that date you gave of 2,500. So it's kind of a well-known place. And what's really bizarre about that, the only other place in the world that I know of that has the exact same architectural style and look is those weird giant rocks. And I think they're in Oman or Yemen. I forget exactly where they're at, but they have that same kind of perfect carving into the front with the false door and the pillars. which is weird because that must be where the Greek and Roman kind of got their style from, those even older designs that even today's, Federal Reserve and several other buildings have copied that look on their building.
Yeah, I'll say I saw something like that in Burma as well, in Myanmar. It was on a giant cliff face, and they did that. They cut it straight down, and then they had a false door in it. But the story goes like this. The frequency of the rock that is there that the doorway encapsulates, or the rock encapsulates the doorway encapsulates the rock, whatever way you want to look at it. The frequency is there. You're not supposed to walk through it with your physical body. What you're supposed to do is put your forehead against it and then start, again, chanting some sort of frequency, whether it's Om or Fa or Ma, whatever it is. You need to get that combination of sounds, and once you get that combination of sounds, it holds in and it opens that frequency doorway or whatever, and people, I'm not sure if it's exactly the physical body, but they all talk about experiences of disappearing beyond the doorway and their minds going off. And where you were talking about the Temple of the Sun, there's a fair few places around there too. And I remember seeing this video, got to be like 2 or 3 years ago. Don't ask me to rename it, can't. But I do remember one thing that stuck. That these 5 scientists going out there, and they were all going to test these doorways with different thought, but they knew what the frequency combination was because they worked with somebody from the mines who understood the frequency combination or whatever chanting mantra that would open that doorway with a certain frequency using the human voice. All of them had 6 different encounters. And one man was like, I'm going to go visit God. I want to see God. I want to visit it. That's my whole goal, is to vibrate through this thing to visit God itself. But he got so deep into the crystal that it scared him. And like a literal crystal, that he went so deep into it that he thought he was going to lose his physical body. So he came back. And all 6 people had different accounts of using the vibration to enter into this doorway, depending on the thought they had going into it, which was interesting in itself. Like their individual thoughts took them to a different portal entrance to a different dimension through the same frequency, opening the same doorway to allow you access to different dimensional realms, like unlimitless, I guess. But the thought you had going into it took you into that very specific, exact, micro-thin resonance that you were in at that time with your thought into that dimension on the other side, which is trippy in itself, but that all occurred right down where you were talking about Temple of the Sun. And then those things, the same carvings in Saudi Arabia, they cut those rocks straight down in the middle. What is the rock constructed of? I'd like to know the Paleozoic qualities of the rocks that are there that are cut out with the false doorways. If I'm naive now, but 20, 40 years ago, I didn't know any of this when I was traveling, looking for Paleozoic crystals inside the doorways I can meditate in. And I didn't know it takes years to understand that, decades, but now I do. And I'm thinking, what are the rocks constructed out of? Because that's only one part of it. If you can send your consciousness out of those rocks, or use that whatever mineral composition to get the right frequency to open doorways in the rocks, what happens when the frequency of the earth changes? And where we're going now, vibration frequency opening, could it open the other way too? I'm not sure.
I think it must have in the past, because just like you were talking about in Peru, there is a giant, what they call the Devil's Door, and it's been cut out of this hard diorite, super hard rock, and that's exactly what they do there too. They take a mixture of ayahuasca and they go put their forehead on the little hole in the middle of it, and people believe that they, a certain person at a certain mindset can travel to another place. But we kind of know that ayahuasca or DMT has that effect either in near-death experiences or through the use of, compounds that you intake. It is kind of bizarre. I think they knew something, but I always had a bigger question about that. Almost all ancient, megalithic sites, and like you said, the core stone of a lot of cities or whatever, they always have a certain kind of stone there, and almost always It's a very high content of quartz crystal. It's always the hardest rocks, like granite or diorite. And it's really bizarre because I wonder if that might have been at that time when the magnetic field was different, or the sun was different, or whatever combination was different. Were they able to get piezoelectric energy directly from the rock? A lot of these places look like they hooked something onto it, like the Devil's Door. I know people believe it's a spiritual site and they think it's a false door and they're going to go to another place. But if you really look at it, it kind of looks like a ship could just back up right to it and attach to it. And when an earthquake went off, they could just charge their ship and leave. I don't know. Maybe that's far-fetched. But it makes
it's not. It's not really, because if you were to put let's say you had something dowsing. Maybe dowsing came from that original art form, and it's an original creation where you actually plug those things in, and you have those things you can hold in your hand and direct the electric elsewhere, like you're talking about charging a craft, where there would be, just like you see mid-air refueling. Everybody's familiar. The big nozzle comes down from the big plane above, and then the fighter jet or whatever snaps up in there, and you can refuel it. Well, why would that not be the same, where you could pull something flexible out of the rocks that you connected and then plug it into something else to recharge it? That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and it kind of fits into these other places that everybody notices that there's evidence of ancient high technology, like starting with the Pyramid of the Sun there, the mercury and all that stuff. I always wondered if that's some kind of booby trap to keep humans out of it until they're at a technological state where they can understand what liquid mercury will not only do to them as far as get them sick or make them go crazy, but what they can do with it technologically. And then you move over to like the Great Pyramid of Giza. A similar kind of thing has been put, or ideas been put forth, that they've tested the inside of it, and there's residue from different compounds like zinc oxide and sulfuric acid. They were pouring this down the channels, and the Nile River would come in through the bottom and bang on the bottom of the pyramid, basically making a sonic pulse. And when that happened, these two chemicals would mix and create hydrogen gas that would go up to these little slots that left. And when this resonance started banging these molecules of hydrogen around, they started releasing X-ray, which would be concentrated right out of that tube that points up into space. So like you said, all of these sites, even the pyramid in China is a similar thing. They have all of this liquid mercury. Yeah, and it's in a refined form. Like what is under it, and what were they hiding? In both places, they built a giant pyramid or multiple pyramids over it so that human beings could never actually go in there, because the elite or the rulers at the time would have always taken credit of being part God, so only they could know, and only they could look at it, only they can enter the inner catacombs and all that stuff. So it's obvious there was technology, but it seems to be a lot more recent even. Like a lot of people think it was pre-Diluvian, but it seems like recently, about 5,000 to 3,000 years ago, humans were on the verge or the cusp of digging that old knowledge up and firing it up again. It seems like in a couple places they might have, not figured out exactly how to do it. But now you fast forward till now, we're a completely technological civilization. And now if you knew some of these things that were there, we could actually access and, interact with these things.
What if it was the same civilization that has existed underground, that can run underground during these cataclysms and then pop up as these gods again? Because you mentioned it, you hit it on the head, that mercury is similar in China. But a lot of the images that we see is captured of what we consider protective gear, PPE, on some of these glyphs. Now, back then, we understood it as that's a rocket ship, that's a spacesuit. But now, because we understand PPE more, looks exactly the same, but would those be the caretakers of the mercury? And they were just captured. Because if you went underground and you knew that, you'd have PPE. Are you kidding me? You pop up like 5,000, 100,000 years later. Yeah, we got stuff to cover our skin, like external body suits. Dude, you guys are still living out there with no clothes almost. You're living with leaves and stuff. Whatever. You can't get in the mercury. But millions of years of tech, or even 100,000 years, 20,000 years. they'd pop back up and they'd be able to be that would be crazy, where somebody could walk in the mercury room where you would walk into in a second and actually die on the spot, or into a salt mine or something where you would slowly turn into a piece of bacon by the time you walk down in there 30 seconds, because it's so adverse to the body for conditions. But if you had PPE, you could be there, put some LED lights on you, make yourself glow and everything. And then are we just looking at a recycle of super simple technologies to explain gods that have come back down? Are these the same people that keep popping up again and again? Like, there's got to be something in this here. Really, there must be.
Well, moving back to the Great Pyramid of Giza, if indeed, they could have got this X-ray machine, so to speak, up and running, it's, directly beamed at a specific constellation in the sky. And if you go look and check it out in Orion's belt, it just happens to be like only 2.5 years, possibly. It would take the message of pulsation from the Great Pyramid of Giza to reach any, planetoid or anybody in the neck of the woods. It would only take 2.5 years, which means it only have to take that same amount of time to get an answer, which is only 5 years. That's not a long time to wait. And, we always think of these high-tech electronics that we're putting up in the sky as satellites, but it seems that some of the ancient people knew how to make ground-based massive machines out of the earth.
Well, you got to think in perspective of time as well. If I wrote a letter in 1600, it would take 4 months to transit on, say, a Spanish medallion or treasure fleet leaving out of Central America to come back over to England or to Spain or to, say, Europe. So that transit between letters on boats going back and forth between both places was 4 months when it first started. Obviously, it got faster. But the same thing, you're talking about a 2.5 year up message. Well, we did it 2 months going over a boat, 4 months going on the original boats, coming back. It's an 8-month round trip in 2.5 years on a star message. It's not very much different. It's orders of magnitude within reason of being able to communicate. So I'm curious what other optical, shall we say, captures have they seen on the other planets that are revolving around those stars? Because if you're going to hop a star to the next star to get over the next planet, 2.5 years on a spacecraft is way easier than, or unless you're using a wormhole, like you started talking about, the Paleozoic thing, perhaps their planet is also connected Paleozoically, which would lead credence to the Stargate films and a lot of the things with Stargate, whereas an instantaneous jump versus what they fed us. We've been fed that it takes 2.5 years at the speed of light to get to the next star. Maybe there's faster ways to do it. We've been fed that you only need to burn. You have to burn oil and fuels to make electricity. Well, we know magnetism works just as good to spin disks, to spin a spindle. We're basically still on steam power. That's all that everything is used for, is to create steam to spin the turbines. Well, what if we were to use magnetic motors to do the same thing? What we've been taught is what we've been taught, or brainwashed into thinking. You only think rocket-fueled ships to penetrate through the atmosphere and get out to space and go to the next star as possible. Because Star Trek and Stargate, that's science fiction, Ransom. That can't be true. Don't talk about it. You're a wacko. We're going to be right back in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Ransom Godwin tonight chatting with me. DuByne here too. We're going to come back and talk about plasma. Double-headed eagles with wafting plasma tails over Kansas. Right after we come back. Hold on for 2 minutes, 2 seconds. We'll see you then.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Are you interested in the paranormal, murder mystery, real natural law? Do you enjoy interviews with amazing guests? Then join Crypt Rick every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Revolution Radio. Studio A, freedomslips.com. Crypt Rick's I've been thinking. Welcome to the Crypt.
Join me at Revolution Radio, Studio B, at 11 a.m. on Saturday for Free Association, when we take a look at philosophy, spirituality, psychology, social issues, and geopolitics. It's every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Studio B at freedomslips.com.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back to the second hour of mini Ice Age conversations. Got Ransom Godwin tonight, joining me with the Mind Tennis. We're talking about ancient cultures, and if our timelines have been pushed back 1 million years, as many news stories just today and yesterday claim that new hominids existed 1 million years prior to what the first known hominids were, then that means our human history just got pushed back 1 million years. What disappeared? What was rewritten in history? What tech has disappeared, reemerged, disappeared again on cycles? Ice Age cycles, 100,000 years. Precession of the equinox, 26,000 years. What about the interglacials every 110,000 years? Cycles within cycles. You know, sometimes we can't talk about this on regular mainstream media because it involves too many touchy subjects. Naughty. But Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Thanks for letting us chat tonight. And if anybody appreciates free speech, if I could talk freely with my speech, consider a donation to keep the running cost, production cost moving along. And we're going to do the same right here. Ransom, I look back through chapters of history and I just see brick foundations with nothing on top, whether it's a baked brick, a mud brick. But there was something there prior that has been built on top of, erased, and then the age of it distorted. And I guess that's how I would start the second hour here. But everyone, thank you for your valuable time, for letting us discuss issues where we think there are missing pieces that could enhance our lives. Ransom, thanks for joining again. And away we go, hour 2.
Sweet. Yeah. You know, I was sitting there thinking about what we were saying. And like you said, we can think about all these ancient cultures and maybe find our place in the cycles if we deciphered, you know, lots and lots of almost indecipherable leftover censored and lost information. But you notice what one thing that all of these stories have a commonality is they kind of go up to this point. They tell us some stuff's going to happen, maybe, but they don't really say what that is. It's almost like, you know, whoever was making that Olmec calendar at the beginning, they were like, okay, so we started here and you want me to make it all the way till here. What happens after that? And then somebody told them, don't worry about that. You don't need to know what's going to go on then. You know, they kind of get left out at the era we're in. But what is the era we're in? Where is stuff going right now? Because, you know, China, Russia, Brazil, you know, they're going to go ahead with their brinks and actually pull out of the dollar, I think, which is going to be the spark to this first financial conflict where they're going to, you know, tell the world, oh, sorry, the dollar's failing. It's not our fault. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't care because I won't use those other currencies because they have no idea that those are all tied into our currencies. So if they stop using the dollar, ours just turns into you know, firewood. In the meantime, though, I'm looking, you know, through these articles and I realized some epiphanies. They just keep on with these ideas about how everybody's about to, you know, die. And it's always just been that way. You know, we got SADS. So I decided to track back SADS before they called it the sudden adult death syndrome. And they used to call it sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, meaning they just don't know why someone's heart stops or whatever. So it was already happening to some degree. So I'm not going to say it all of a sudden exploded, but I come across these other, you know, articles like scientists are testing the first ever treatment for a broken heart syndrome that, you know, weirdly, you know, kills people through heart attack. So there's just an increasing number, evidently, of reasons to, you know, have a heart attack. Now, let's get past that and see some of the stuff. Anonymous, they hacked all of these apps that are made to track women's cycles. And it made me start thinking, you know, how come Anonymous never hacks anything that actually helps society? Like, you notice they're not exposing the Epstein client list. Oops, you better bleep that out. Or they're not, you know, they're not hacking to find out who all's being spied on ever since the Edward Snowden revelations. They never hack anything to tell us anything at all. But they keep threatening to do it. But when they finally hit, it seems to be all tied into what the government wants at the same time. So they portray that there's these white hats out there like Anonymous that are hacking the system to protect us, but they seem to always go along with the establishment, kind of, making weird stuff. And then you got the White House quietly modeling for $200 oil shock, $200 a barrel. So, we're looking at $10 a gallon gasoline probably there soon. And, on and on. Supply chain shortages. They're going to make new laws where you can only use plastic, or you're not going to be able to use all these products. And remember, I was talking last week about the petroleum. When the prices go up, you'll see that reflected in all your products, the plastics. And that's exactly what they're going to do. So they're about to shut down everything. And I find it ironic that also I keep finding these articles about from everything from marijuana to anxiety drugs from across the board. They're now saying all of these things, including some words I can't say, that are causing cognitive decline later in life, basically meaning about middle age, right before you would be getting ready to retire. And isn't it ironic that that's the same age that all of these sudden adult death syndromes mainly are starting to hit, and people with broken hearts? Meanwhile, China is taking over the South Pacific. They're taking over, our dollar, obviously. But what are they planning? According to them, they're planning on finding a new Earth because they think this one's done. So they have a new 115-page paper supposedly leaked, and it's talking about China's plan to find Earth 2.0. Are we alone in the universe? They don't care if we're alone. They're hoping to find just another resource, place. And it's just, it's a complete scientific, I don't want to say that, a sci-fi movie made for the humans right now. So every government is trying to give you this side thought that aliens are, possibly real at the same time. And then when you correlate that to the ancient things, I think we're about to see stuff like, not specifically, but like the Mayan gods are coming back to the earth. They're 9 gods and we're supposed to see them and stuff. And I think that's misrepresented things in the sky that they saw, whether it was technology or, plasma in the sky. Either way, they knew that a specific cycle was coming. It seems like technology's on that same cycle. And if you've been reading about the, now they're wanting to fire or get rid of the guy that said that the Google stuff is sentient. They're trying to backtrack that now because the reaction from the public still wasn't a positive one. And you notice that they just keep doing that, and they're exponentially getting you used to the idea. All of these companies now are developing robots to hang out with and take care of elderly people, which, by the way, are all going into cognitive decline, according to, all these scientists talking about everything, including butter. It's all nonsense. They're putting people in a perpetual state of fear where that's what's causing the cognitive decline, is that their head's full of all of these different factors that don't matter, when the only thing that really matters is we are going into hard times here in the U.S. You can blame it on what you want, but you're not going to make it through unless you get your stuff together this year. Hard times are coming, and I mean they're coming this winter by every indication across the board: economy, food, trade, and war. Things are about to get rough, and I hate to be a sourpuss on that, but think about that also, correlating to what we were talking about. All of these predictions or prophecies or whatever, they all talk about war coming at this cycle, and here we are. We're into it.
I'm going to pour a few more lemons on the sour, if you don't mind. China is establishing liquidity with the Bank for International Settlements, just as the U.S. dollar has an agreement with the Bank for International Settlements for liquidity. So whatever happens, if anybody needs a bailout at any magnitude, or other countries need a bailout of any magnitude, before the BIS only dealt with dollars to do the same, or Swiss francs or euros. Now they've decided to move over to the Chinese currency as well, which just everything before that I just mentioned was 100% homogeny of U.S. interests / Western interests. Didn't matter. Any of those currencies within that sphere were all Western influenced. But now this is the first time that the BIS comes out, and I don't know, there's a lot going on. If we're going to do simple numbers here, you know, the BRICS population is 3.2 billion people. And the G7 and all these nations, 770 million. I'll say 800 million. So there's 4x more people existing in this new trade bloc that just emerged as of yesterday, out of nowhere, than there are. 4x more. So there's 4x more liquidity in that market. There's 4x more money. There's 4x more product, 4x more manufacturing, 4x more consumption, 4x more consumers. All in that thing that they're going to be backing by gold here. This new BRICS currency is going to be backed by physical gold from all these countries, India, Russia, China, that have been getting gold along with Brazil. In India, they have some of the largest gold holdings on the planet just for the individual citizen, have for since time immemorial, literally like 10,000, 20,000 years ago. This area of the world has always found its wealth in gold, and we're talking tens of thousands of years, literally. Cradle of civilization right there, Indus Valley. And they still measure their wealth in gold, and they are moving to a gold standard through these areas. Again, China, some of the oldest history on the planet. They're going back to a gold standard again? Like, you know, we're getting played on this 3,000-year cycle here. That's way too short. You know, there's cycles within cycles within cycles, and these same rulers or leaders of nations, through whatever you call elections, put into the places the choices for the people. They're in the cycle, riding on top of it to disguise it. It's not natural, any of these things happening. And, you know, and then Russia, so they don't even know yet. They're just saying, Russia's going to cut off the gas. But they don't know that. They're just speculating. So then what does Germany do? They didn't even cut the gas off yet. They didn't do it yet. When Germany restarts all the coal plants. Ooh, Russia back. They're going to cut back the gas supply. Well, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't listen to Greta and kept your power production moving forward and maybe move to magnetic motors. Or here's the thing. Zoltler is a German physicist that had all these very efficient plus energy devices using gravitational vortex power or the vortex itself. Funneled water spinning down on a vortex can push a spindle as well. You don't have to burn steam. You can focus water to do it the same. And the more focused that water is, the higher the RPMs are for your output. And you can scale it. Something the size of a river, like we see hydroelectric dams, but imagine if it was like 50 times more efficient, if they would have focused it through a little tiny funnel where when it starts to compress in on itself, it speeds up. And he was a master of the vortex power of dialing down the next step in to speed up the water to make it compress on itself, to move that much faster as it finally got to the exit point. And that could have been an inch wide, a mile wide, and 10 feet wide, whatever. But that velocity of water coming out of there was so incredibly intense, far above what if you're going to take like a drop of water out of a dropper and then just drop it onto the surface of the table, you're going to get a splash. But if you were going to run that same dropper through something really, really small and turn it into a vortex power, you would drill a hole through your table. That's literally the difference in the output of power by focusing water. And Zoltler from Germany, and they're going back to coal power plants. Why aren't they using their water resources to generate free power? You would never need to build a coal plant. All you'd have to do is build like a concrete funnel on a mathematical precision to get water to focus itself. Oh, they have something on the very, very light version in Ransom. When we're talking about this, if you could bring up some slides and some image search there, gravitational vortex power, otherwise known as GVP, same Zoltler vortex principles. All they do is they take like you've ever been a construction site along a road where they're putting in new drainage. You see those round pipes there? where you take one of those and you put it in the middle of a stream or on the side of a stream, depending on how much water you have, and you make the water flow in there. You cut a little area for the water to flow in, and you cut a hole out of the bottom. So all it does is spins like your bath water at the very end of your bath, just as it's going down on the drain there. You mimic that effect 3-4 feet deep, and it just spins in that piece of concrete pipe, and then the water just goes out the bottom. You never dam it. You never need to dam it. That's the thing. You only need to make it spin. You're only harnessing the spin out of it. So even all these things that we've built, all these dams over the last century, water control is one thing. Producing electricity is another. Like we could have just 1 cubic meter of flow can give you 58 megawatts per year on a 1 cubic meter per flow. As long as you can maintain that flow, and you have to think about how much power that is. Way more than the American home. And, if anybody out there could do the math on this, just run into any search engine and ask how many kilowatts or megawatts does the average American home use during 1 year. So this one little tiny thing that you've seen on the roadside of that concrete pipe, cut a hole in the bottom after you make that, spin the water out, and you can get 58 megawatts off of one little tiny 6-foot wide thing in the middle of a stream. Now imagine if you were going to step those down as the water exited out of one and then collected into the next one. So on a hillside, you could have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 of those blended into the scape of the nature. You wouldn't have to put a giant dam up there. Unless you were for water control projects, that's different. But to generate electricity, it just steps from one GVP plant out and then to the next GVP plant and then out as you step down the hill. So if you had 500 foot a drop or 400 foot a drop, you could put dozens and dozens of those things out there, and then now you're multiplying by 10s and 20s of those 58 megawatts on a 1 meter flow, 1 cubic meter per second flow. That's insane, and that's why I'm so shocked that Germany's going to start the coal plants when all this technology exists for us to get water, to compress it, to turn it into a vortex, to do the same thing steam does, but with gravity. It's free. You don't have to power anything. And see, that's how disguised nature is. That's why they make us think we have to go by rockets to other planets instead of using thoughts through Paleozoic crystalline structures inside our planet.
Yeah, that looks like an amazing invention right there. I was showing him a GIF of it. It's pretty simplistic, and it makes you wonder, like,
very.
Why isn't that in every gutter system and things like that that catches
Yeah,
rain?
exactly. You got it. Ransom, you hit it on the head. Like every gutter system and drainage system in every city on the planet could use this to make power as the water runs out of a city every time it rains. Even if it's a partial thing, they always say, well, yeah, your solar panels, you can only use them 58% of the time. Oh, wind, it's only good, 60% of the time. Well, rainfall captured, super heavy rainwater pushes something faster. Imagine capturing all the rainwater runoff to produce electricity versus solar panel and wind panels. That's crazy that they're not doing that. I think you're on mute, Ransom.
Yeah, I wonder how many people just saw what I just showed them and are already putting forth the steps to make one, because that's one of those mind-blowing things. If not when you're watching it or understanding it, but if you've never seen it and then you realize the potential of that, it makes you wonder why such a primitive idea hasn't been widespread for thousands of years. I mean, it's just simple centrifugal force, and you're using energy right off of the planet, gravity, and the spin and everything. And how much did you say that generated? A lot of electricity there for just what it is as a stationary a stationary form that just allows the water to fall.
Yeah, it spins it for a few seconds. You're never damming the river or the streams. You're spinning the water for a few seconds, and then it drains out the bottom of where you spinned it, and it just continues down its happy journey to a lake or the ocean. So how many of these other, Ransom, I could ask you too, if it's that simple to use water and gravity to produce power, I mean, how much easier would it be to spin magnets against each other to create, power to then pump the water up to, and then you start to think about this, which one would be more efficient to get the water to a point to then push it? Magnetic motors to use some kind of drive pump to take the water up so the water would flow faster through the gravitational vortex or the actual vortice to spin a turbine? Or do you think it would be the magnetic motor would just be enough where you wouldn't need that extra step of water unless you lived in a water-rich area, that you could have both? One would be for a desert. Obviously, that GVP doesn't work in a desert. It does not work in a desert. Or like in Kansas, it would have a difficult time working there. You have to have some steam, some drop somewhere, 30-foot drop, and you could put probably 5 of those down. Every 6 feet, drop it out. You imagine have 6 of those, so that's 58 megawatts. That's 58,000 kilowatts. So you think about in your American home, how many kilowatts do you use per day? The average is probably 1. 1 kilowatt? No, maybe a little more. It's best to look it up on a search engine and see exactly, because this stuff changes by the day, by the week, by the month. So think about kilowatts. How much power are you using in an average home? So 58,000 kilowatts. So if you're talking about an American home maybe running on, let's say, 1 kilowatt an hour at super high charge and super high usage, and maybe half of that during the night when people are sleeping. 58,000 hours of that. How long is that? And 58,000 hours should be the question. How much time is 58,000 hours? Because 24 hours in a day, so that could power everybody's home exactly up to that minute to the day, and divide 58,000 by 24, and you will see how many homes that you could power 24 hours a day using a 1 kilowatt base load just off this one little tiny device. Now step it down every 6 feet and multiply by 6, and then you'll see how much power can come out in a 30-foot drop. That's the crazy thing. Like, you were not using 30-foot drops to power this kind of thing where you can run several homes for a year. Okay, using magnetic motors, maybe that's a big step. Sorry, Tesla, our world's not ready. Still, to this day, 120 years later, the world's still not ready for Tesla inventions and technologies. Maybe we could just step it down to simple water. We don't need magnetic fields. Magnetic fields, you're bad. You're out of fashion today. Vortex, water, you're where it's at, baby. Bring on the water. Magnetic field, you're out of here. Get over the next room. Audition, you're out. Bye-bye. We're going to stick with water. Okay, spin it. That's not happening. I can't believe that either of these technologies are not being used right now. It's kind of, when do you think it will be when do you think people will actually catch on to this? Those are going into self-sufficiency and resiliency right now to try to find their own power systems off the grid? Or do you think they'll naturally evolve out of society and then suddenly, we can do this up and down every hill across Europe and United States and Canada and everywhere else across Central America and all of South America. Hey, we can do it in Africa. Everybody gets free power. Oh, don't bring on the magnetic motors, man. There's enough water drop that we'll never see a magnetic motor. They'll probably have to pay for transmission from somewhere and say like Zaire or the Congo or something like this, and take that power and then put it through wires up into, say, Chad or something. I don't know. We're living in a bizarre world, and I'm still shocked. Ransom, my serious question is, do you think we'll see either of these technologies unveiled in the next, during our lifetimes? Magnetic motors, gravitational vortex power?
Yeah, I think so, but it's from the elite. And, you kind of made a point a little while ago where you were talking about how they were firing up coal plants when there's all these easier things. And I was just thinking about it. That's kind of small fries. Imagine the amount that you could put when we're talking about thousands of feet drop off of the Rocky Mountains all over the place. I mean, and the fact that you're not stopping the water, and the water will still be used for irrigation, farming, and all of that other stuff downstream. It's not stopping anything. It doesn't hurt the ecology of an area. It's just simply, harnessing the Earth's energy off of gravity there. And there would be no reason why all of these cities, like mine, for example, where I live, we're right next to a 5,000 foot change in elevation in a short couple miles, and in a couple places it's not even miles. So you're talking about like all of the water that naturally comes down and feeds all of the valley and everything, the snow melt and all of that would all be turned into energy. It makes you wonder. So I don't really think that they're going to go that way, because they don't want these epiphanies to get out, because monkey see, monkey do. And if the governments start using some of these new technologies, of course, the people are going to rebel and do that again. So I kind of wanted to take you down a bizarre world of how it seems like, the elite are really weird people, and they have some really weird plans. And this might be me just looking into it too much or too deep. But so I'm surfing the headlines, and I see these patterns. I talk about this all the time. So I come across this one. It's kind of funny. It says friends at first sniff, people drawn to others that smell like them. And I thought, I knew something about that when it came to pregnant women wanting to go back to their kinfolk. There's some kind of weird thing where they want to smell their kinfolk, and then all of a sudden the man is no longer desirable for them as far as smelling. There's a weird phenomenon like that, and maybe that's to help rear children, and stuff like that in evolution. But this is kind of funny, because now bear with me. I'm going to go through a couple headlines, and they seemingly are unrelated, but I don't think so. So here's this headline, and it's talking about, smells from different various ways, pheromones, etc. Friends at first sniff, people are drawn to others who smell just like them. Now let's move to this article. International Space Station smells awful because astronauts fart more in space. And then here's another one on MSNBC. International Space Station smells rotten because astronauts fart. Now, that all seems funny. But
No. Wait a second. I'm going to stop before you go forward with this madness.
I got more. Go ahead, though.
No, wait. They told us that they could filter their pee to drink again 16 million times into infinity.
That's
exactly. But they can't get
an
air circulation system up there with oxygen or whatever, really? Like, are you kidding me? You can recirculate your pee to drink 65 times as fresh water, but you can't take the smell out of the air. Okay, something just doesn't sit right there. Maybe it's a smell in the air. I don't know.
And that's kind of where I was about to go, because I don't know, 20 years ago or more, I had a friend that kind of made fun of me one time. We were partying, and I was talking about recycling urine, that the astronauts do that, and everybody started kind of laughing at me and saying, "Oh my God, this guy thinks astronauts drink piss water." And then, like 10 years later, I see an article, I send it to them, they're like, "Haha, yeah, whatever." But this pattern's starting to emerge of this idea that you need to get in a enclosed space with other people. Now, it's monkey see, monkey do, just kind of like what I was saying. So we go and, friends at first sniff. Okay, that's funny. But the space station smells awful because, and they can't get rid of it. They can't filter it, evidently, which doesn't make any sense. And then here's this from Yahoo Finance. Beer made from recycled toilet water wins admirers in Singapore. Okay, so now they're pushing the idea that you can drink all of your stuff that you're buying at the store, because it'll spread from beer to other things. And you need to water your gardens with recycled poop water, all of this stuff. They're getting people used to it. And then you see this article right here, what the elite are planning and what the elite view the future as. And then it circles back to what you were talking about using dirty fuels. Futuristic flying nuclear hotel can carry 5,000 guests and would never need to land for years. And they're trying to build this thing, and it's similar to some of the stuff they're talking about putting into space. Hotels where people just hang out for years for some reason. So they're getting people used to this idea that some people will have to deal with, close quarters and rations and smelling each other and being cramped together. But, if you want to have a different smell of how different people hang out together, you can hang out with the elite in these 5,000 guest things that are going to be flying. Now, why would they want to be flying around for years in the sky? You might want to ask yourself. It's nuclear power. But what happens when that thing crashes down to the earth where all the peons live? Well, there's a nuclear reactor that probably gets smashed across the side of, the mountain. And here's another article pitching what the lower class will get used to if they want to fly and travel. Airline debuts next level bunk bed pods for economy flyers. Now, keep in mind what we were talking about the astronauts, right? About how it stinks and blah, blah, blah. And then you look at these closed quarters, they're little cubicles. And keep in mind the TSA has already pushed ideas of putting shock collars on people. People removing you from planes because of your political opinions, etc. Travel places. So imagine whenever they start they keep telling you these ideas of you can't have a single family home anymore. You got to live in these teeny tiny homes. And weirdly, they've got the environmentalists on their side where they all think you should live in this little box together, and then I'm sure you've seen across the headlines all of these people dying in tractor trailers and the amount of people increasing dying along our border. And then in the news, the Supreme Court goes ahead and reverses stay in Mexico. So that's giving people more of an idea to flood up here. We're all supposed to live in little tiny boxes with each other. And then weird stuff like anchovies raining from the skies in San Francisco. I don't know. It is a strange world, but I know none of that really tied together. But think about the image and the mental picture they're giving the public through the headlines. It's all about rations and being confined and locked down. And then I had another epiphany about...
No, I can put it together for you there.
Yeah, go for it.
The fish raining down from the sky is a weather anomaly with extreme pressures causing ocean water and whatever is in that area to be sucked up at incredibly high. I bet there was massive hail with that storm too. That is a sign in the sky, a sign of the times in terms of where our jet streams are moving and how these cloud cells, jet streams are bunching up with a compressed atmosphere on our planet that's happening as we speak, and a weakening magnetic field on our planet. So there shall be signs in the skies. There shall be. The earth shall quake. Yes, it shall. It is now. It's beginning. This electromagnetic field change on our planet is in earnest, way past the beginning stages. Just like this, the reset is way past the beginning stages. Like people are feeling it. There's something in the air, literally. People are feeling it and seeing it. But this cramped quarters thing goes so many directions. Because, the next time, the masses of males that may want to fly again. Yeah, you're on a C-130 heading to the battlefield flying. That's your in-flight experience. When the draft starts, I mean, in the UK, they're already talking about, 300,000 sending people to get ready for the next battle so we can stop a war. Sacrifice what you can to stop the war. It's not about the war started. It's about sacrifice what you can now to stop the war from happening, which is super interesting. But one thing points to like an off-world survival colony spinning around. So Elysium was one thing, but you really couldn't even view that from the planet. This would be more like way low Earth orbit. So imagine if you were using hydrogen, well, the Hindenburg, wink, wink, or helium. Oh, that gas doesn't explode. Okay, maybe we could still use gases to achieve the same end, but they demonized hydrogen so much that nobody wanted to look at number 2. Floats nearly the same, but oh no, it's too scary. It's a gas. Don't try it again. But what if they were using helium with magnetic motors? Because you couldn't use water there. You'd have to use helium and a magnetic motor still, because even if you're 10, 20, 30 miles up, you're still getting the Earth's magnetic field. You don't have to be at ground level to use the magnetic field of the planet to power devices. You could be at any altitude within reason. I mean, above 100 miles, okay, then you're using the sun's magnetic field. We're starting to get way out. past the ionosphere, way up. We're looking at, the field-aligned currents, the currents that are coming down from the sun connected to us, these magnetic field ropes coming down. Okay. Eventually, you're getting power from everywhere, from the sun to our planet. That whole looping is free, provided by nature. So even if your altitude in the sky, say 30, 40 miles, up. types of materials, again, heat, whatever it would be to stop. You could slow down during the reentry. You wouldn't have to go at super speeds to burn up your craft. You could control the reentry speed or velocity so you wouldn't burn up or get that heat edge on it. Although it would take you an hour or so to get through that versus a few seconds, you could slow that down. But would you get chased by other craft? Who knows? I think it was a hobbyist who learned the secrets of electrogravitics, got up there and either crashed or, I don't know, like you said, it could have been something tractor beam style and threw it on the planet for a message to Earth. I don't know. It could go either direction. Today's world wouldn't surprise me if they were both correct. It really wouldn't surprise me. One to cover the other. All right. Well, we're coming back to the final minutes here. Mini Ice Age Conversations. Godwin from 420 TV Freedomist Films is joining me all night to talk. I'm going to leave you with foods that eliminate mucus. So if you have a cough or a cold or you're like scratchy throat or whatever that is, these foods eliminate that feeling. Key limes, watermelon, romaine lettuce, mangoes, walnuts, onions, oranges, and ginger. In the Northern Hemisphere, we're in a bountiful harvest right now. You can easily find a couple of those. So you're going in and out of the air con, maybe you get too much dust. You're out working in the field and are just somewhere out. There's a lot of dust around in the air these days. So if you're getting that thing in your throat, I'll read it again. Key limes, watermelon, romaine lettuce, mangoes, which will push you toward the alkaline side, walnuts, onions, oranges, and ginger.